Hi, this is Adam Stevens from the Brigham Young University Technology Transfer Office, and this is our first podcast episode where we've had an opportunity to hear primarily from our director, Dave Brown. Dave, please introduce yourself. Explain how long you've been in University Technology Transfer role and how long you've been director of the Tech Transfer Office here at BYU.
Sure, thanks. So yeah, I was a private practice attorney, commercial bankruptcy attorney in St. Louis, and then I did that for 6 years, and then came out here and got an MBA in finance from BYU, and I graduated then in 2011, and came and worked for Tech Transfer right after that. They had an opening for the person doing legal work here, and so it was a combination of legal and business for me, and so I've been here 12 years. And most of that time, I was doing software licensing and our legal work, and I still am. But then as of last June, I'm the director as well.
Okay. So you've been working in University Tech Transfer for a number of years, but you've only been a director for a few months. Do you feel like you've had enough time at this point to establish what you think the vision for tech transfer should be at your university?
Yeah, I like thinking about those sorts of issues, thinking about the future and vision and things that we could do. That's kind of fun for me. And during my whole time here, the 12 years, I've had ideas, and we've done some of them and not done others of them. And so I've definitely had some ideas. I think it's good to have a directional vision for a tech transfer office. It's hard to predict what will work and what won't. And as you know, Adam, we're running a number of experiments here. This podcast is one of them. And so we're trying things. We have to have room to innovate, just like a startup company would do. One of my favorite books on this topic or a related topic is Obliquity by John Kay. And I think the subtitle to it is How Our Goals Are Best Achieved Indirectly. So I think you kind of set the direction and then grab every opportunity along the way. But we can talk more about vision in a minute if you want.
Yeah, well, so how much do you feel like your vision is still in flux at this point?
Well, let's see. We're in a phase of looking for opportunities, experimenting and trying out different things. And you and I just this morning were talking about a service that we could offer professors that we haven't offered in the past. So it's in flux in the sense that we're experimenting with different things, but directionally, I think we're pretty well there. So some things that I know directionally are right is but definitely are engaging with students more. A major part of the university's mission is to provide these learning opportunities for students, and I see us as unusually situated to provide a great business learning experience for students, like helping them launch startups and so on. So we'll do a lot more of that. We definitely want to. Our prime mission is to get technologies out in the market where they can solve problems for people. So finding out ways that we can do that better is definitely a core mission as well.
Great. Well, I hope that we'll have a chance later to address some of the specifics of the BYU vision. But I'm hoping that this will be really helpful for new tech transfer directors, new people that are coming in, or universities that are thinking of establishing a tech transfer office for the first time and trying to capture a vision of what tech transfer can be. So, what are some of the factors or the things that they should consider when they're trying to figure out what the vision of tech transfer in their university should be? Not
Right.
necessarily looking at BYU.
Okay, sure. You can, different universities have different tech transfer visions. And so sometimes it feels like no one's nailed the model yet. Tech transfer basically started in 1982 with the Bayh-Dole Act. And since then, people have moved in different directions. There have been times when many universities were pushing the idea that tech transfer could be a source of money. They could fuel a university financially. For most universities, that hasn't really panned out. Something like 16% of universities or thereabouts have actually a profitable tech transfer office. Most offices don't cover their own expenses. In almost every year we do at BYU, as it turns out, and there are factors that help us do that. But making tech transfer a financial windfall is not probably a great vision for most people. The other things that you've seen people do here at BYU, we see it as a service office. We're providing a service to our faculty, the students, and outside constituents. Other offices see it as maybe uh, a way to attract faculty. And definitely, we have faculty members who come and interview at BYU. And as part of their interview process, they want to meet with the tech transfer office to make sure we're good enough that we'll be able to take their technologies to market. And I really respect that. I think that's a good thing. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is there are a variety of approaches. When I was in MBA school, my operations professor was telling a story one time where his son had a wart on his finger. And so he took him to the doctor. And he said, Doctor, what are you going to do to remove the wart? And the doctor said, well, we can freeze it off, or we can burn it off, or we can do something else. And so my professor said, so none of those solutions works 100% of the time then. And the doctor said, yeah, but how did you know? And he said, well, if there were 100% solution, then everyone would just do that, right? And so with tech transfer, it feels a little bit like that. Like if one university really nailed the model in a compelling way, many or most universities would do the same thing. So we're
Yeah.
still in flux as an industry, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I imagine too that that depends a little bit on what some of the goals and the aims of the university are. You have to fit yourself as a tech transfer office within the overall aims and goals and visions of the university at large.
Yeah, and so that's where we kind of really shine at BYU. So BYU is a very mission-focused university. The mission statement is very clear, and like I say, the marching orders for tech transfer are we want to improve the world by making sure that technologies don't end with academic publication, but they actually get out there and solve problems for people. So that is really helpful in our office. We know exactly what we're trying to do.
Yeah. How do you strike the balance between being the director of your office and, the goals and visions and input of administrators that might be working over you and be in charge of the office, at least technically?
Okay, yeah. So I think here, because of a strong university mission statement, we're pretty well aligned. I've only been in the position for a few months, but it definitely hasn't felt like anyone is disagrees with the direction we're going or has some fundamental problem with what we do here. The I do think the way that you balance and coordinate with other departments and administrators in the university is to make sure you understand where they're coming from. So the person up a level for me is the associate academic vice president, currently Larry Howell here, and so I meet with him monthly at least, and definitely understanding what he wants us to do is key. And I I wouldn't like I'm not motivated to do things other than what the administration wants us to do. Like we're employees here and we want to do what the university wants. But for lateral offices, I think one that's more challenging for tech transfer offices is what about academic units? Like different colleges might have different interests, different focuses, or different things they want tech transfer to do. And so meeting with people is key. As you know, we're going to different department meetings, things, trying to be face to face with people so we can really understand what they want. But I think you have to do your homework, like do your research and then figure out exactly what people want. We are here because we have a service focus. We're trying to solve people's problems. So when I'm meeting with other professors or administrators, other departments on campus, I want to know what problems are they trying to solve? Like what is the issue? And maybe, sometimes, a lot of times, we can help solve those problems. Maybe we're not the people in some cases.
Yeah. And when you say solving people's problems, in a lot of ways, that's kind of what the researchers at the university do. They're out solving problems, and we're there to solve their problems so that they can solve other problems.
Yeah, that's one way to envision tech transfer. If you see yourself as a service office, is that we're providing a service to professors. Like we're here to support them so that they can do their stuff, and that's definitely true. And one thing I see as part of our mission here is to kind of take commercialization off the table, off the plate of a professor. If you're a professor, you're doing so many things. You're trying to get research funding, you're teaching classes, you're trying to mentor students, do all these things that are important to what we're doing at BYU. And so you shouldn't have to also master accounting and law and marketing. Like we can take that away and handle that for you.
I liked one of the things one of the things you mentioned earlier. You talked about how when you were not the director but just working in tech transfer, that you provided some feedback and some things that were tried and some weren't. And I'm not trying to focus on the nitty gritty details, but on the
Sure.
vision.
Hmm.
What's the role of others in the office? Some people that are reporting to you. What's their role in helping guide and direct the vision of the office?
Yeah, well, so we have a weekly staff meeting here, and I think we're pretty collaborative. I try to have informal discussions frequently with all members of the office. We're a small office, so you can do that. The Scrum theory, that theory of managing that's popular with software developers, says that if you have a group larger than 8 people, the group gets exponentially more difficult to manage. It's just hard to keep up the little informal communications you need with people. So we're fortunate here to be a small office. There are 3 of us doing licensing, and we have a controller, and we have a relationships manager. So basically 5 people, and then a bunch of student employees. But we're a tight, small group. So I feel like when we have meetings, we can talk to each other and share ideas really quickly and naturally. And for example, the idea you were raising this morning, Adam, it's not something I had thought of really before, but I think my response to you, we batted ideas around for a minute, and I said, well, let's try this in some form. Like we might as well experiment with it. Sounds like a good idea. So I think I try to be open to new ideas, and we try to be independent in the office, but also work as a team. But you can give feedback. Like, does that all make sense from your perspective, or? How are we doing?
Yeah, I've appreciated your willingness to be open to ideas coming from other people, and I mean, I know that you're part of that probably is that things aren't established for you. It's new, and so you're
Sure.
taking in a lot of input, and that's just one way of making things synergistic so that we can all benefit. And it has been for me beneficial to feel like my input is valued and of value to the office, and that's been very helpful.
Which it definitely is. And I don't know if I mentioned this in the patent episode, which was our first episode, but when you first got here, you immediately saved us a bunch of money by fixing some patenting things we were doing wrong. So it was nice, easy to support those sorts of things. But the also, it's kind of like we're in a tech transfer office. It's so funny. We work with startup companies, and yet it's really easy to be bureaucratic and beholden to tradition and administrative concerns and so on. And really, we need to strive to be as innovative as our startup companies. So the question is, how can you innovate? In corporations, they talk about entrepreneurship, being innovative and entrepreneurial within a large organization. And that's kind of, I don't love the term entrepreneurship, but that's kind of what we're trying to do here is how can we be innovative and change? And so part of that is generating ideas internally. Part of it in the last podcast episode, I was mentioning something great that PhysMath did, our College of Physical and Mathematical Sciences, that I want to learn from them and do something similar for us. And so, yeah, we're willing to get ideas wherever we can for sure.
That's great. Again, looking to help someone that's either setting up a new tech transfer office or someone that's coming in as a new director for a tech transfer office. What resources are out there besides things like our podcast here where they can look for to get input and guidance on how to set up a vision for their office?
Yeah, and well, and first of all, there's we're talking vision for the office. Vision for the industry is a separate thing that maybe we can talk about in a minute. But if you're setting up a new office and you're trying to decide what's important, first you need to figure out what the administration wants the office to do. Like, what are they envisioning? They're definitely your vision somehow has to accommodate some bare essentials of tech transfer. You've got to comply with the federal requirements of BYU when you have federally sponsored research. One reason tech transfer exists is to comply with those laws. So definitely do that. And then there's a traditional kind of the layman's view of what tech transfer does. Professor discloses an invention, you file patents on it, then you license out to industry. That is a core function. And so you've got to have a vision that includes expanding your ability to do that and to do it well. But beyond that, there's some wiggle room. Like you can think of what best suits your university. Is your university interested in reaching out to the local community and being very involved there? That could guide you one way with your vision. Do you have very entrepreneurial students? How big is the student body? What kinds of professors do you have? Are they, if you were in a liberal arts college or something, I would guess that tech transfer would probably be a pretty small role because most of them are not going to be thinking of themselves as inventors, even though today, anyone can create software, so you would still have opportunities. If you were at some stereotypical engineering sort of university, maybe MIT or someplace like that, uh, obviously you're going to want to hit those sorts of innovations hard and be providing a service to those professors. But yeah, you have to look where you're at. You asked what resources are available. So most people would say Autumn, which is our Association of University Technology Managers. That's the main industry organization for tech transfer. They have publications and meetings, things like that. There's a conference I attend every year is Licensing Executive Society. That was just a week ago. And that's kind of a third of the people there are law firm attorneys, a third are in-house licensing people, maybe attorneys, maybe not, from corporations, and then a third are people like myself, people from tech transfer. And that's a great meeting for kind of learning legal tactics and industry trends, things like this. And I think we're a pretty collegial industry. If some new, in fact, this happened a couple of weeks ago. If some new director called me up and said, "Look, I'm just starting. What tips do you have?" Like, we would definitely talk about that. Uh, I do think if you're starting out, you know, start out with some reasonable metrics and think how many disclosures will we reasonably expect to receive in a year? Of those, how many can we license? How many? Just have some minimal targets to kind of get up and going with.
Yeah. Um, one thing that I think about a little bit as in our role here is, you know, how do we define a success, right? Because
Right,
not every technology will get licensed. Not
right,
every technology that is licensed will succeed. I think a big part of the vision is, how do we define success so that we know that we're doing what we can achieve? And
Right.
how does that get work into your vision for the university?
Yeah, and I don't think I'll state our specific internal goals right now, but you know what they are. And the so success sometimes looks at like just hitting your goals for a given year. And so this year, through the end of the year, we have a very specific goal and we're completely on course to achieve it. We will, no problem. So if we do that, it feels like a successful year at some sort of base level. Next year, we have a goal for next year also, and it's an ambitious goal. And if we hit that, that will be great. It's not all about the numbers, but it is good to have some numerical goals so you can kind of track your progress. The In terms of metrics, if you were going to look to metrics for guidance on your success, I think the metrics that have mattered most around here are one is realization rate. You receive a certain number of invention disclosures, and at some universities, people will say you should go around knocking on doors, talking to professors to get more disclosures. That seems like a mistake. I think you'll get low quality disclosures that way. It's better to serve the people who want to be served. If someone brings you a technology, then you know they're serious about commercialization at some level. So I don't see number of disclosures as a great metric, but the realization rate is taking those disclosures and asking how many of those have we actually commercialized, actually licensed or assigned. And I wouldn't include option agreements in that number. It can get too fuzzy, but how many have you licensed or assigned to a third party? Then around here, our realization rate is usually 50 to 70%. The industry, oh, now that's going to sound braggy because the industry standard is like 24% or something, but we have some institutional advantages too. Like there's some reasons we do as well as we do. And that though is a measure of how you're performing, how tech transfer is performing, because receiving disclosures can be completely passive, but licensing them is a very non-passive activity. You have to do some work. So that's a good measure. Then I think number of raw startup companies is a good measure. Creating a startup company is to me the most satisfying thing you can do in tech transfer, assuming the company succeeds, right? So raw number that you create is important. In terms of overall success, so there are different levels. If you're a faculty service, as we are, a good way to measure your success is to survey the faculty. And we have done that in the past, and the results were good. We felt good about it. And we gained some insights, found out some things that professors didn't like, some things they did like. So surveying your faculty would be a good way to do that. If you were at a university where tech transfer is being measured numerically, at least you would benefit from ease of measurement, even though I think that's probably not the best goal. The things that are harder to measure but are important are like impact on the lives of the students, like community involvement, providing solutions to the world. Like when we commercialize a technology, it's hard for us, even if we know exactly how it's been commercialized, it's hard to measure how it's actually affecting people out in the world. We know some of our technologies have helped people a lot, but that can be hard to measure. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but those are some thoughts.
Yeah, it's good to have thoughts, and each person's going to have to balance those on their own, what matters to them, and each university will have to decide what matters to them. But it's good to have
Mhm.
some things, I think, just to guide people to consider what should work.
Definitely.
I've been looking around. I said I'm new to the role of being in a tech transfer office, but I've been looking around at some of the other universities. Some of them seem like they incorporate copyrightable works, creative works into their tech transfer offices. Some of them, like here at BYU, they keep them separate. How do you balance whether to do it that way?
Yeah, so that's not a decision I've made, but for years, for decades at BYU, we've had a separate creative works department, and so they commercialize academic works, curriculum-based things like you're describing, or maybe artistic things, videos, CDs, all this sort of material. So it probably makes sense to have them be separate. I know BYU is in the minority by having them separate. What I see as good about it is there are technologies that would probably not be as commercializable or commercialized as effectively if they were part of tech transfer. So, for example, they'll list for sale online a video that might only sell a couple hundred copies ever, but that's important to the artist, to the creator of it. They want to get their work out there. If that were just kind of thrown in the bin with all the technologies in tech transfer, it could easily be ignored because invariably you're going to be drawn to technologies that have high commercial potential. So I think separating it out is great because artistic works get a fair shake in a way they might not if they're in with tech transfer. But also the way we commercialize is very different. Over in our creative works department, the director Giovanni Tata has great connections with publishing companies, And that's like a different segment that we just don't interact with in tech transfer very much. So it is kind of a different business expertise, I would say.
Yeah. Well, both are achieving a similar goal of getting works and technology ideas out into the market where they don't just die on a university shelf after a publication.
Right.
But they, like you say, the markets are different, the returns on investment can be different, and do see a lot of benefit from the division.
Hmm.
No criticism of anyone else because I haven't experienced anything
Yeah,
else
yeah.
either. But
And they do a great job. Yeah.
I guess in some ways it relates a little bit to my next question, which is budgets. I mean,
Yeah.
like any university department or organization, there has to be some sort of a budget constraint, just defining what you can and can't do. How does your
Right.
vision interact with your budget and controlling what you do here?
Right. Yeah. So there are some universities, a small number of universities that maybe because of a large commercial hit or some other windfall or a huge donation or something have a huge budget for tech transfer, but those are definitely the exception. Most tech transfer offices feel like they're resource constrained, and most tech transfer offices are pretty small in numbers, like ours is. I think, constraints breed creativity. Like if you're restrained, you have to be strategic and creative. With an unlimited budget, I think you'd be tempted to do some things that would be irrational that would just like a startup company that raises too much money up front and then does some things that don't make sense. So being constrained in that way is not necessarily a bad thing. So most tech transfer offices have financial constraints. The hardest one is deciding when to spend money on patenting. We over the years we've controlled patenting costs pretty well here. We do the normal strategic things, typically filing provisional patent applications, typically not filing internationally unless we have a licensee, and so on. And so we do have to control budgets there. For other areas, I'm trying to think where else I feel constrained. Like with an unlimited budget, you would spend a lot on marketing, for example, hire additional people. We have in our little office, we've managed to have a very high level of professionals. So you're a patent attorney, I'm an attorney. Bennett, our other licensing person, has run a engineering prototyping company and was very relevant to his work as our engineering lead. And then Jennifer, our relationships manager, had been a paralegal for years previously. David Campbell was an industry attorney. He's our controller now. So we have a high level of expertise and we're able to do a lot without hiring a lot of outside experts. If that makes sense. Um, you're asking about prioritizing though. And really, so the other day I was talking to someone in the office about spending money on an experiment to kind of test a way of marketing technologies. And my comment there was, let's do a limited experiment and then we need to see results. Like we need to see that this expenditure actually moves the dial, like helps us commercialize technologies, or we're not going to go forward with it. There are a lot of expensive products and software solutions that you can get in tech transfer that may or may not pan out for people. So I don't know, you just have to be careful and monitor your expenditures, make sure they're actually moving the dial for you.
All right. Um, with our time that we have left, I'd like to maybe get to a little bit of a braggadocio kind of place, but talk a little bit about maybe what makes BYU different from other technology transfer opportunities. What sets BYU apart? What unique things about BYU make tech transfer work and the way it does? I mean, you talked about the average
Hmm.
realization rate at BYU versus industry wide. What makes it tick and work so well here at BYU?
Okay, and then do you mind if I talk about my vision for the industry a little bit too?
Not at all.
Okay, because that's a fun thing to talk about too. But yeah, no, BYU, I love BYU. I work here on purpose and have for a while, and two of my three degrees are from BYU. So what is special? So the university, obviously sponsored by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, has a special, unique mission, and as a result of that, we have faculty members who could be somewhere else, MIT, Harvard, Stanford, wherever, and choose to be here instead. So I do think we have a very high level of faculty. But you could say the same about students, and we have a massive student body. I don't know what it is. It's over 30,000. What is it, 32,000 or something
Something
students?
like that.
And they are great. It's interesting. I've been here 12 years, 12, 13, and over that time, I've seen a change in the students. And I'm not saying it's specific to BYU, but the students have gotten better, I think. And we just have exceptional students. Maybe we've done a better job of interfacing with them in the office too. I don't know. But there are a few other things kind of there's an entrepreneurial culture in Utah Valley and BYU, and people have tried to explain. A few years ago, there was a great article in the New York Times trying to explain why that is, and I'm not sure. The church, the church influence definitely is a part of it, but we just have a very entrepreneurial culture here. Tech transfer does well, but we've also had like several unicorns, companies that hit $1 billion. There were student startups from BYU students that did not come through tech transfer that were their own ideas, and so there are all these environmental factors that really help BYU, and very supportive faculty and um, administration and community as well. But in terms of the place of tech transfer, not just at BYU, but in the industry going forward, and maybe this is a little specific to BYU because sometimes people will say, okay, you're doing a lot of tech commercialization, you have a lot of startup companies. Why doesn't BYU have an incubator? Why don't you sponsor a business incubator and provide office space and all these services for student startups? And I look at that and I look around campus and I think this place is an incubator. BYU is, you could envision it as a massive business incubator. If you're a student entrepreneur and you want to succeed with a tech company, you're 20 years old or whatever, I think probably the best thing you can do is enroll in BYU, pay very affordable tuition, and have access to tech transfer if you need an idea, the Rollins Center, which supports student startup companies, our professors who are world class. There are various funding opportunities, business competitions, and things on campus. It strikes me as probably the least risky way to start a startup company. So Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, people like that will talk about how you really should launch a company during those years, during the college years, because you don't have teenage children yet. You don't have other things that would make it harder or make you feel more constrained or risky about starting a startup company. So it feels like the least risky time. Some people like Peter Thiel, who I really like as a business person, he back in 2010 or so started the Thiel Fellowship, where he pays students to drop out of school so they can launch a startup company. And some of them, I mean, the founder of Ethereum was one of his guys, and so that's gone well for some of them. But I think my advice would be pretty well opposite that. Like I say, be a BYU student, or hopefully it works well at other universities too. Be a student and use all the resources and launch a company while you're in college.
Great.
So that's my rambling answer to that question.
Great.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, well, thanks, Dave, for being here with us today. I think we're coming close to the end of our time. And is there anything else you'd like to address before we close up?
Well, let's see. No, just if I can reiterate, like the our industry still feels like a young industry. We're 40 years into this, and it's an industry that was born in a highly regulated area in higher education, right? And so there are federal regulations, these other things we have to comply with, and you can spend a lot of time doing that. If you're not careful, you can spend a lot of time accounting on all these other things. But I think as much as possible, there are a lot of bad metaphors for tech transfer. When I first got here, because I was an attorney, I thought, well, tech transfer is kind of like a law firm. We should provide service to the faculty. They come, we solve their problem, just like you do in a law firm. And that's not a great metaphor because you're not just providing a service. There are several different process flows that you're doing, and so it's not quite right. I've heard other people say, well, we're a bit like a factory because people give us our disclosures and then we process them and license them out. Like that's not really true because we have infinite storage space. Like if you don't have to account for the cost of storing inventory, that makes you not very much like a factory, right? And same deal with a startup company. People will say tech transfer is like a startup company, and no, it isn't because most of our offices can't scale. Like we can maybe outsource things, but we just can't expand the way that a new enterprise does. Despite all that, though, the principle is so we need to like look at what tech transfer actually is, like where we're actually at, and question assumptions. Just this morning, we were questioning the way we do patent reimbursement, and the only reason we could come up with that we were doing it this way was tradition, which is not a very good reason for that at all. And so you have to question assumptions, and then we all just need to strive to be more innovative, like grab ideas wherever we can, involve student employees because they come up with great innovative ideas too. My on-campus internship team just yesterday presented a couple ideas. They said the reason students don't engage with tech transfer office more is just because they're busy, and here are ways you could help them engage that would fit their schedules. And they had some recommendations that were really great. So anyway, we just need to innovate and grab ideas wherever we can.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, you said earlier in the interview, no one's perfected this yet.
Right,
Otherwise, everyone would be doing it that way.
right,
So go ahead and be innovative, like we're asking researchers to do. Be innovative, bring stuff into tech transfer. In tech transfer, let's be innovative. Let's try new things, get new people in. uh, and be successful.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Adam.